Welcome to Sustainably Speaking Africa, a podcast about reshaping narratives around sustainability and climate action in Africa. This podcast is brought to you by the Kenya Climate Innovation Centre and is made at Semabox. Join us for this and other episodes as we talk to industry leaders, frontline communities, and the innovators who are accelerating the progress towards a greener, sustainable future. Welcome again to Sustainably Speaking, and as always, please like, share, and subscribe.
Hi everyone, welcome to Sustainably Speaking Africa. This is a podcast where we discuss everything to do with climate change and climate action in Africa. For our first episode, we are joined by Mr. Juan. I will allow him to pronounce both his names so that I don't massacre them. And we'll discuss a lot about renewable energy. We will discuss quite a bit about climate financing and energy access. Welcome and thank you for being a very, very first guest in this episode.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Please pronounce your name for us.
It's Joao. It's a Portuguese name. I think you did pretty well, actually.
Thank you.
And, surname Cunha. I'm with the African Development Bank. I've been with the bank, actually, for over 17 years now, so part of the furniture at this stage. I'm leading a team in renewable energy, so I'm division manager for renewable energy, and I'm managing one of the largest special facilities for renewable energy in Africa. It's called the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa.
All right. How long have you been in Africa for?
I've lost count. I think more than 2 decades.
Okay.
Yes. I started in Mozambique, worked in private sector development in Mozambique, then in Angola with agribusiness. And then eventually I joined the African Development Bank. And I've been very happy at the AfDB ever since.
Right.
Lived in 3 countries, now based in Kenya. This is where the action is when it comes to renewable energy and climate. So I have to be in the middle of the action.
Karibu, Kenya. We're happy to have you.
Asante.
Let's talk a bit about renewable energy. And for purposes of those who are listening to us for the first time and want to understand what renewable energy is, what is renewable energy?
Well, renewable energy is, it's a form of energy that is abundant, is replenishable, and is carbon-free, right? I think the best examples are solar and wind. I think everyone can understand that, but hydropower, I would say, also fits that definition as long as rivers don't run dry. And that is a risk that could come about with climate change. There is geothermal as well, which is also an abundant resource, especially in this part of the African continent. I would say those are the 4 main forms of renewable energy. Other people will also refer to sort of ocean energy or wave energy, tidal energy. There's also waste to energy, turning waste products and, forest biomass, for example, into power and electricity or heat. So these are forms of power that sort of are not based on fossil fuels. They're not emitting CO2 and other pollutants, and they are, replenishable, right? Subject to sustainable use, obviously. I think the only one that will not ever exhaust, and the day it exhausts, then we're all done, is solar, and I guess wind, but which links to solar. But the others, I guess, over a very long time scale, may be exhausted. But let's not think about it now.
Okay, we can put that on pause for now. Fossil fuels, and yesterday we had our president in Kenya lift the logging ban, and that's a fossil fuel, I believe, by the definition of environmentalists. And a lot of environmentalists are scared or up in arms with this particular declaration that was made. From the bank's perspective, what is likely to happen, and especially with financing the renewable energy or sustainability and climate change?
So could you just repeat
I
again?
asked many questions in
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Logging has been
Logging.
yes, has been uplifted in Kenya.
Yes,
Yeah, effective yesterday.
yes.
And your work is to encourage the renewable energy sources, like you mentioned. From where you sit, what dangers are we likely to see with the lifting of the logging ban in Kenya?
Right. Let me start probably from a broader non-energy related perspective, and then we can come to energy. So, forests are a form of natural capital. They are an asset. They provide a service. They provide, they support biodiversity. They protect ecosystems. They prevent or mitigate risks of droughts and floods. They regulate the climate. So they're real assets, economic assets. And as such, they should be used sustainably and protected to the extent possible. So in a way, if we lift the ban on logging, we're sending, in my view, not trying to get into Kenyan politics, but it does send a signal that, um, you know, forests are open for being plundered, right? And I don't think that's a move in the right direction. Obviously, everything needs to be balanced, and there are ways to promote sustainable forestry and sustainable logging, and there's global standards like the Forest Sustainability Certificate that can ensure that this is done in a sustainable way. Since you did not mention, it sounds like there's probably a bit of a swing towards the other opposite of allowing for vast parts of the country that have forests to be sort of felled and monetized for short-term profits at the expense of long-term, ecosystem services and also financial revenues for the country.
Okay. Financial revenues.
Yeah, look, if you remove forest cover, you got to have more extreme climatic events. You got to have more floods. You got to have more droughts. That comes at a cost, right? And the government will have to bear that cost. Private sector will bear that cost. Even households will probably bear the brunt of it, especially poor households who also live off, the biodiversity in these areas. So there is an economic implication. There is a cost, So if you're sort of, privatizing the benefits of forests by letting some enterprises cut down the forests and sell them at a profit. But there is a social cost, there is an environmental cost that is not being factored in and should be factored in. Again, not knowing the details, so maybe there is some clauses in this new legislation that bring in some element of protection and sort of compensation, but there is an issue. And it is a global issue, sort of logging or illegal logging, or in this case, legal logging or unsustainable logging is a global problem. We're losing forest cover across the world at a breakneck speed. It is shocking, right?
Okay.
And it'd be good to see Kenya leading the way in sustainable logging and forestry. Then linking to energy, one form of energy for cooking is through biomass and charcoal, which comes from chopping down trees, right? So you have that connection there. I guess this new legislation will not have an influence or an impact on that, but yeah, there is a connection there.
Okay.
And maybe it will promote more of that form of energy as opposed to sort of a transition to more sustainable, more cleaner cooking technologies.
There's a danger we face when we're discussing these things, and especially with experts, where we end up discussing things at a very high level, where you mentioned, for instance, that logging affects us socially, it affects us environmentally, and it affects the economy. But I want us to speak to the ordinary person who needs it broken down further. So when we say socially, for instance, how does logging affect us socially, or how does logging affect us environmentally?
Well, I guess I've already highlighted some of the environmental challenges that would be created by logging. Um, I guess socially, I guess it's all intertwined, right? You know, forests and natural resources, natural capital are also a form of capital that sustains livelihoods, especially in the rural areas. So by removing that, you're having a direct impact in communities that surround these areas. You know, they will be more vulnerable to climate impacts. They will be also losing some of the biodiversity around in their vicinity, which is something that sort of also affects them. And that may then trigger unintended consequences like migration to cities for lack of economic opportunity, for lack of livelihoods, you know, breakdown in families, you know, lack of social cohesion. You know, people, when they live in communities, you know, there's an element of social cohesion. When they move to cities, you know, they lose a lot of their networks. You know, in a way, in a lot of cases, they're actually made worse off because at least in your community, you know, people take care of you. You move to a city, to a suburb, to a slum, you know, that's not the case, right? So there are a number of unintended social consequences coming from those kinds of actions.
Okay, get you. Let's move a bit to climate financing. That's your area of joy. What is climate financing?
So climate finance is, well, I guess the terminology is pretty self-explanatory. Is a form of finance that is helping to address or overcome aspects of climate resilience or adaptation, or aspects of mitigation. So, for example, when you finance a renewable energy project, that's climate finance, because you're financing a carbon-free technology.
Yes.
Right? When you are financing, you know, restoration of forests, for example, reforestation programs, you know, forest protection schemes, you know, that's also a form of climate finance, because you are funding clear sort of climate benefits. A lot of it comes from public sources, right, through global facilities like the Green Climate Fund, for example. But there is also an element of private capital being deployed as climate finance, right? And again, I've mentioned, you know, when we do projects in clean energy, that can be counted or considered climate finance. If it comes from private sources, then it is climate finance, yeah.
Okay. There's a perception that I'm treading to dangerous ground, but there's a perception that a lot of financing goes to climate mitigation and not climate adaptation.
Yes.
What do you have to say about that?
Oh, it's absolutely true. And there is an obvious reason. I think it's a lot easier to define a mitigation project vis-a-vis an adaptation project. So if you fund, say, a solar power plant, it's very easy to understand, you know, the capacity, the output, you know, the displacement of other more polluting forms of energy.
Yeah.
Everything is very easily quantifiable. And obviously, finance in general, but climate finance is no exception. You like to sort of link your finance to very specific, tangible benefits,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Or returns, as bankers like to call, right? Um, in adaptation, this link is a lot more tenuous, right? It's very hard to define because the benefits of the adaptation or resilience are sort of a little bit more fuzzy, a little bit more indirect, as I've expanded earlier. There's impact on the environment and there's impact on communities. You need to put a price on that.
Yes.
And it's a lot harder to put a price on it. So then it's a lot harder to define, the cost benefit of putting money in that project as opposed to a mitigation project, right? I think that's one of the reasons. I guess the other reason is just that there is a much larger supply of mitigation projects as opposed to adaptation projects,
Okay.
right? Especially driven by large countries and large economies like China, India, Brazil. These are countries that can bring in very large mitigation projects to the table and raise billions. And then the adaptation projects tend to be much smaller and more local. So, when you start splitting the cake of climate finance, clearly a lot more goes into mitigation. Yes.
Okay.
But it is an issue. It is an issue for Africa
Okay.
because Africa is not really contributing to the problem. Historically, has not contributed because it's a continent that is still industrializing, as opposed to, Europe and North America and to a large extent Asia have already undergone industrial sort of revolution, if you will, 100 years, 200 years ago, right? They've been polluting,
For years.
the atmosphere for a long time. They've created the problem, number one. And number two, the global share of emissions coming from Africa is tiny. It's less than 4%, right? So mitigation is not really an African issue. Obviously, we want to see an energy transition. We don't want Africa to be locked in old school, polluting, inefficient technologies because there's a lot of very good clean energy technologies available. But yeah, sorry, I just lost my train of thought here for a second. You'll have to get me out here. Let me
It's
see.
okay, but because now that we're in that line,
Yeah, I was going to talking the renewables versus adaptation. Okay. Yes, so mitigation is not really an African issue.
yes,
Adaptation is a huge issue because the continent is at the forefront of the impacts from global climate change. Some of the most vulnerable countries in the world are in Africa. I think 10, or more. There's a number of them. Mozambique, I think, and Madagascar, I think, rank at the top. These countries are ravaged every 2 years by big hurricanes, big floods. And then it's not hurricanes and floods, it's droughts, right? So millions of people are affected, casualties, infrastructure, huge economic loss for the country, right? And this is where climate finance for adaptation is absolutely essential. And that's where we need the billions, right? So at the African Development Bank, we have a target to sort of have some kind of a element of parity between the two. If anything, a bias towards climate adaptation. But the reality at the end of the day is that the supply of projects and the ease of financing mitigation versus adaptation ultimately sort of kind of rebalances again in favor of mitigation.
mitigation. You sit on the side of the giver of money, for lack of a better term to use. But as we wrap up this conversation, I'm curious to know what steps should we take to make sure that we receive this adaptation money? Because, like you say, getting money for mitigation is very easy. For adaptation, maybe not so easy. But what can we do? What strategies can we use to get financing for adaptation? And not just for Kenya, for Africa.
Sure. And again, as a renewable energy expert, I'm actually spending a lot of time outside of my comfort zone. So I'll speak from a high level. I won't be able to speak to the details, but but I would say that there is a need for more financial innovation, to thinking outside of the box on how to package these adaptation projects, how to assess and quantify the adaptation benefits, and then how to turn them into investable products of sorts that can attract the capital and the funding, right? I think on the upside, there are a number of positive developments. We've seen countries raising green bonds to finance sort of climate resilient infrastructure. We've seen and we're seeing, debt for nature swaps, where certain countries or creditor countries can forgive, debts in exchange for climate adaptation projects, for preserving forests and mangroves and all sorts of natural capital assets. So I think these are the sort of products or innovations that I think they need to be scaled up in the context of the African continent. At the African Development Bank, we are developing what we call the Adaptation Benefit Mechanism, ABM. Again, I cannot speak through the details. It's led by a different team, but it is a very exciting effort to quantify the benefits of adaptation and then to turn them into units that could be tradable in international markets. So if you want to be an investor in adaptation, you can buy units of this adaptation benefit mechanism and you know what you're getting. And that funding will then go in support of, high quality adaptation projects that will obviously be curated, vetted, prepackaged for this financial instrument.
All right. Okay, we need to wrap up, but I'd like to invite you back to speak specifically on renewable energy, which is your area. But as I let you go, if you were to describe Africa's climate journey as is right now in one word, what word would you use?
Africa climate?
The journey, the climate action journey in Africa in one word.
Africa climate journey in one word.
Yes. Having sat in Cote d'Ivoire, having sat in Kenya.
I would say ambition.
Okay.
And I say that because Africa is on the front lines, but Africa also holds the key to the solutions, right? And you're seeing a number of countries moving in the right direction, be in terms of energy transition and renewable energy and investing more and promoting more clean sources of power generation. But you're also seeing more investment and more protection of natural capital and natural assets. Ambition, because I think there's still room for more.
Okay.
And I expect Africa to have that ambition of, being a carbon neutral continent, being a continent that really supports a lot of entrepreneurship, that promotes innovative projects, and that is able to show the world that it's not just a receiver, it's a contributor to solving the problem of climate.
Despite not being the ones that created the problem.
Despite not being not being the ones that created, yes, I guess that's an injustice there amongst other injustices, right? And let's not go there. I think it's better to focus on opportunities. I think over the history of humanity, you've seen situations like this, situations of injustice, situation of asymmetries, and you've also seen countries pushing back, fighting back, and coming to the forefront, and not just being victims, not just being passive in face of their circumstances. And I guess in this day and age, with the digital revolution, with artificial intelligence, the ability to generate knowledge, the ability to deliver new solutions at very low cost, I think levels the playing field and gives Africa an opportunity to really rise up to the challenge and become a global leader in climate action.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you back very soon to have more discussions on renewable energy. Right?
Absolutely, but I'll come prepared next time.
Don't worry, we know we ambushed you, but thank you so much for honoring.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And thank you so much to our viewers. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.